Nam Janju Pada Dagni Gapsuchi, Dagi Chonyan Gipe Choknaki, Jolam Panju Sangre Jopa,
Sanje Chodam
Jodang Soki, Chonam, Janju Pada Dagni Gapsuchi, Dagi Chonyan Gipe Choknaki, Jolam Panju Sangre Jopa,
Sanje Chodam
Jodang Soki, Chonam, Janju Pada Dagni Gapsuchi, Dagi Chonyan Gipe Choknaki, Jolam Panju Sangre Jopa,
So Dayata Gade
Ga
Gade
gate tara sum gate godi saha.
Dayata Omo Gade
Gate sum
Para
gate
Para
tara
Gade
sum gate godi saha.
Dayata Omo Gade
Gate tara sum gate godi saha.
아니 강가라 참지 장가 좋들 내졌다 심제 탐제가 돈도 토자라나 마치고 산제에 고마를 뭐지 진행죠 토바차 디에체는 잔조세에 랍잖아 추치도 나서 나와래 신고를 시벌을推고推了 推제 쇼마노 가지고도 안 가서 봐봐 된다 계세체 뭐 시월에 세배는 준주고 되는 제시 팀을 얘기해 서서 고마차
And good morning, everybody. And we begin by setting our motivation as usual to do whatever we possibly can to attain peerless state of enlightenment in order to be of maximum benefit to all sentient beings. And to attain that state, we know we must perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings, we need to train in them, of course. To train properly, we need to have a good understanding of them. And we gain that understanding by relying upon an unmistaken source. So it is this morning that we are here today to listen to a text called The Bodhisattva's Way of Life, as composed by the great master Shantideva, and hear an explanation of some of the verses of this text.
아니 뭐라게 진짜 자외 라마 이발은 나봐 갑자라 투제 쳐버 또바 샤자 투바 세다 아니 또바 샤자 투바데 아니 가서라다 가서 샤제 차니 아니 가서 예냠샤게 가서 굴러 쳐고메 도저서 아니 예산에 예냠샤게 때나 투제 거 홍세 나봐 굴러 얼다 가서 쳐고메 도저서 어디는지 아니 가서 쳔베 용수 써봐치 어디는지 무슨 뭐라 요 서서 어디는 공부하자
And likewise, as we normally do, we also start with the visualization out in front of, in fact, our own root guru in aspect here, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who has seated in the Vajra posture with one face and two hands, the right hand in the earth touching mudra, and the left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. The body itself is in the nature of pure, clear light, and all the major minor marks of an enlightened being are evident.
랑게 타고도 아니 랑게 진실에 아니 체리 파만네 빈자 도고 도문네 쳐봐 안다가니 저 밤에 섬제 아니 야 소소 레게 오게 데토네 랑기 오면 랑게 데토네 기오면 되게 아니 명자에 아니 저 년도 메게 데 쇠베 아니 타예베 도와지 두고 섬제 타 마사와 메바유 사사 공바자
And all around us, then, we are visualizing all kind mother sentient beings, exemplified by our own parents, our relatives, our friends, and those who are neutral to us. And especially prominent should be those with whom we have a difficult relationship to karma, that even maybe at the very hearing of their name, we're uncomfortable, we feel some antagonism. And so we visualize all of these sentient beings there and feel that they are all present without exception.
아니 두나 세트베 가서 라마샤자 생게 안데라 아니 가서디 아니 가서 지오고 엄가버 점바 아모고 투가 홍고 이게 좀 세다 투가 홍래 아니 왜서 빠도 매버 쳐대 아니 싱람자는 내베 이시바디게 아니 젠자네 이시바디게 돼 라마 안 투가 온베 나바 젠자네 팀 아니 저거 가서 원래 온고 추일라마 제주나 발에 미개고 우겐데 그래서 어떤지 공부하셔.
And bringing our attention again to the figure in front, we see that the Buddha is marked at the crown with an Om, at the throat with an A, and at the heart with the Hung syllable. And from the Hung at the heart, and countless rays of light emanate, going out into the pure realms and inviting from there the wisdom beings and the empowering deities. The wisdom beings dissolve into the main figure, and the empowering deities confer empowerment, some of the nectar of which overflows at the crown and spontaneously produces the figure of Akshobhya.
어다 랑가 타요 뭐가 심자 탐적에 아니 지워 엄가버 점바 아모 투어 홍보 어다 이거 좀 세타바체 어들 공부시
Likewise, we see that in all the figures of the sentient beings all around us are similarly marked with the Hong syllables.
딱 가리켜봐 요래서는 아니 나라도 semje 되게 아니 dimni 바자데 제바 제티게체 아니 dun에서도 라마투베 온보게 아니 dimni 바자데 제바다 어때데 다데 룽아에서 또 바자데 제바다 다 되네 다마다 켜봤지 레멘도 다 룽아 요소 요바데 집어지자와 집어지자래 어때서
So what is the
너무 배셔와도 좋대게 아니 다다데 가서 또 투베 온보게 룽아에서인데 딱 너무 두서 바자데 제바 빵되겠지 어때래 좀
And so what is the distinction or point of mentioning the fact that all sentient beings also are similarly marked with the Hong? And so the idea is here to lay down imprints on the mind, on our own mind, on the minds of all other sentient beings, and in having to that in common with the essential figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who is thus marked. So here it's the demonstrating representing the body, as the speech, and Hong as the mind. And so in a sense, we all possess the body, speech, and mind. And so therefore it's laying down the imprints so that they are less likely to be overcome by the mental afflictions associated with body, speech, and mind.
다 되네서 가서데 가서데 도나세데 라마 투베 온보데 아니 가서 룽아 요소도 너무도서 바자도 잡았잖아 가서는 아니 sem제데도 투게 람랄람 뭔가 좀 상게 다 말해서 sem제 되게데 아니 sem제 투게 람라 뭔가 좀 상게 차요 말와 안 돼서 보다 바자도 잡아 되게 차 되게도 어디 켜봤는데 요 되게도 어디 됐지 다들 뭐 인도 아니 내가 sem제라 미베 아니 닝제 아니 다들 가서 좀 바자도 잡아지 다 맞아 봐도 다 못는 동에게 나한테 말해서 안 동에 그런 모습에 닝제게 동을 때나 동을 모습에 닝제게 아니 되네 아니 동에 교대 잡아지 되네 아니 대화 교대 잡아지 아니 대화초는 지마로서는 잡아고 어떻게
And so a further point here is, of course, that the Buddha, who is marked by the Hong, has in generating the mind of enlightenment, in progressing on that path with that motivation, and in attaining full and complete enlightenment, has so purified all aspects of body, speech, and mind. And so in placing Oma Hong at the crown, throat, and heart of all the sentient beings all around us, we are showing too that they have that aspiration to emulate the Buddha, and that they also need to generate that mind of enlightenment and progress along the path with that motivation and attain full and complete enlightenment, and thereby purifying all aspects of body, speech, and mind. And so here it's kind of in an aspirational sense, laying down this kind of imprint. And so then we look at all sentient beings also with this mind of compassion, realizing that in their situation they are experiencing suffering and to undergo continuous suffering. And so we make that positive aspiration, how wonderful it would be if they were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And likewise, in generating love for all of these sentient beings, we make that aspiration. How wonderful it would be if they had happiness and the causes of happiness.
What are the nigga to make you the Chabati theater and there were good the Chabata there? Any nature is a Hassam Ken. Hassam Ken a Pachiga to do and a Simja Tamjas and a Simja Chigi, there were Tamja, there were Dunga Tamja to the Jama to a several. That the jet to a new Sula Tusana and Dula said that Lamatuya Umbo. Simja Tuja, Lamla Umbas of Honatu, and the Conjo Combadi Madonna, Tomato, Conga Combadi to Ibayina. Shantideva ta kaja beme lundu kamda mewa samba bala newa chita washido kenge yowa ija ane Shantideva ta kaja chiga toba mewa chi tuktukurwa wata dine tuktuku yoydo ane ta konga komba jo matuna tamado tuba chigi samsa semike.
And so in developing these aspirations, to relieve all sentient beings of suffering and the causes of suffering, and place all sentient beings in happiness and the causes of happiness, we develop this sort of very personal sense of responsibility, exalted intention to say, I will be the one who will do that. I will be the one who will take on this responsibility. And so we recognize that responsibility is that we really need to remove the suffering of all sentient beings and place them into happiness. But the reality is that we know we can't do that even for one person at the moment. And so we look to the state of mind that is possible, that makes it possible to really work in such a vast way for sentient beings. And we settle on the idea of attaining enlightenment itself as the only possibility. And so really it's that sense of, looking around to see who has that kind of capacity. And it is an enlightened being that they have developed, the mind of enlightenment, trained on the path and attained that state of enlightenment. They have now in that state of mind to be able to cognize all of the kind of personalities, dispositions, karmas of all sentient beings who can work spontaneously and effortlessly to be able to fulfill their needs without any obstacle. And so this is the obvious state. I state I must myself attain. And so one develops this sense of real, definite need to attain that state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, and thereby generate the mind of enlightenment.
What did I say? What did I say? What said you say? What did I say? Oh, yeah. Because I want to jump the car.
So the Shokran Nyapchu Napke and a gone there. Sumba, Jikba Chimbo, Jungwala, Gumsen.
What does last? What does 딱 앉아지 단다 뭐저 삼로 당원의 신체 삼로 당원의 신체는 딱 앉아지 가서다 제다 말아서 남겨내 잠바데 닝제스의 개심부지기 요래 출루 용서 개심부지기 요래 뭐 출루 용서가 다 닝부소를 찾대도 봐 그러 출루 닝부소를 찾대도 다 된데 이번 인자 딱 앉아지 잠바데 닝제디 아니 닝제 첼롱아 야고 용하라 닝제스의 동에게 나와를 미쳐버려 다 동에게 내수 가세 안띵사고 심마신 거 토네 아니 닝제도 비탈로 쪽도 닝제도 니바칠로 쪽도 근데 이제 동에게 내수 약고 신에게 개심버려도 갑도 대화를 저 관나와 저거 나와 갑도 강에 잡아 대삼게 아니 동에 나와를 미쳐봐게지 요래 다 대삼 맛에 아니 배 띵사배 관에 삼었다 와이나 아니 심제 용서를 닝제게 투에 준 것도 가서 심제 용서 답이나 코앞에 심제 용서 아니 동행 가서다 레다 녀모베 생활제 인베 좀 생기 안 라와메가 차대도 딜라데는 닝지겨 가서 가서다 동행 내수 가세 야고 심베 출게 아니 닝제디 자차다 띵삽도 줘있어 자차다 띵삽을 줘줘 것도 아니 딜라데네 아니 잠바데야 아니 딜라데네 자차와 띵삽을 준 거로 봐 잠바스데 대화데 대되로 안 돼 자치로 띵sab로 켜봐 용도와 되는 자 동의에 내수 삐다고 셰디 개침버려도 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 되는 인자 단다 근데 콜로 땅 벽값소 동에 막 뭐때 온도 다 동네 빵고요. 동네 빵고도 동네 빵고도 당부 동네 뭐트거든. 동네 동네 교회 동네 차바 뒤제게 동네 세송고도. 아니 될라 동네 될라 아니 동네 파베 땡바워스 동네 파베 땡바워스 동네게 아니 저 파바 소위면도 팔람 토번 소위면도 원도 두고 매바 인상 딱다지 뭐트 두고 매바 인상 아니 동네 파베 땡바워스 손에 들어봐. 제가 나다 차다 동네라고 어디가 수인이 하고도 그래. 둘이 앉아 하고도 다 되자마자 차바 뒤제게 동네에 먹어 줘도. 동네 자마자 교회 동네에 먹어 줘. 교회 동네 자마자 차바 뒤제게 동네에 먹어 줘. 다 차바 뒤제게 동네 뭐 맞죠? 봐도 동네 문에 좀 먹어 주면 좋아. 내가 뭐 맞죠 봐이나 동네 레 타리에게 동네 무슨밖에 닝제돼야 닝제 셀로 가지게 두면 좋아. 그래서 그 내가 같이 보시는 거 된자 코하게 동네가 싸워 코하게 동네 샤자자 하고 그도 뒤난에 잡아 뒤지게 동네 하고 그도 아니 뒤 싸워도 단지 머리가 임바 하고 그도 다 뒤에서 거치 가서 뒤 뒤 싸워도 마신 봐도 야 동네에 띵sab로 그 제마 하고 두면 돼. 그래서 그 닝제 셀롱 아직 개침 뭐 수저래도 개침 뭐 수저래도
And so really when looking into suffering and the response to that, the compassion, and likewise looking into happiness and response to that, a love of wanting to place all beings in that happiness, we need to really get a measure for the sense of breadth and depth that belongs to these concepts. So when we look into love and compassion, these are qualities that are easily appreciated universally, and they're kind of central to all spiritual traditions. And that this goes without saying, it's extremely important. And that, by and large, one can define the compassion for something that finds suffering unbearable and finds the suffering of others unbearable and then wants to have to do something about it. And so here we need to kind of really understand, therefore, the whole length and breadth of suffering itself. And indeed, the more we understand suffering in all its guises, in all its subtleties, the more we can cultivate a broad and comprehensive and profound compassion. And so this is something that's very, very important, that suffering is not simply related to an occasional headache or stomach ache or any other kind of physical, it's merely physical discomfort. But when we go into it and look at it deeply, we see that it has to be something that it pervades all sentient beings, that it relates to all sentient beings, and that here, that through the power of karma, because of sentient beings being under the power of karma and afflictive emotions, that suffering is inevitable, is something that we have to really become very, very clear about, very, very clear. And so that means that those sentient beings have no volition in many ways, no sense of power for themselves, are too much under the influence of these mental afflictions. And so the more we understand suffering in this context, in this kind of light, the broader and deeper our sense of compassion will be. And like the same goes for love, and that the degree to which we have this sense of appreciation and a feeling of affection and closeness for sentient beings, the more that sense of love increases as well. But both need this analysis into the reasoning behind them in order to really make that love and that compassion really comprehensive. And so, like when the Buddha taught turned the wheel of Dharma for the first time and elucidated on the 4 Arya truths, he really looked into a suffering. We talked about the suffering, the suffering of change, and pervasive suffering. And so these are kind of like the Buddha pointing out these different levels that we need to contemplate suffering. And here, that it's very, very clear that, that one can feel the mental and physical discomfort of the suffering, kind of the suffering of pain, and then reflecting on changing, the suffering of change, merely being, a sense of contaminated happiness that must also always degenerate into discomfort, unhappiness, and dissatisfaction. And but most of all, he was really pointing out that we need to comprehend suffering at the level of pervasive suffering. And the very fact of being born into cyclic existence, you are doomed to suffer by having these contaminated aggregates. And so here, the level at which we understand suffering there is very, very important. And it's no accident that the Buddha pointed out that when he talked about the true suffering and true cause of suffering, true cessation of suffering, and true path in the 4 Arya truths, he was pointing out that this is only understandable, or this is only truly realizable, as it were, from the point of view of an Arya being. And these are truths from an Arya's point of view. They see what is really the case here. It's up to us to study and to kind of assimilate all of what has been reflected on in this first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so it means getting beyond the notion of a sort of a shallow sense of compassion for those who are sick and ill and so on, and including not just those, but all sentient beings as our objects of compassion. And so here it's kind of like through not really understanding the nature of the pervasive sense of suffering that keeps our compassion so limited. And so even when we have an understanding of the suffering of change, of course, that expands our notion of what suffering is and to what degree we are experiencing that suffering. But we must gain an understanding of suffering from the level of pervasive suffering, that it is kind of like, as it says, it is all pervasive. And that here, that here it points to all of the suffering in cyclic existence. The very fact that we are in cyclic existence, it implies as well that the root of that suffering is the ignorance of grasping at the true existence of a self. And so here it's important to kind of really gain this really comprehensive, vast understanding of suffering in all its different angles and guises and representations, in order to develop a fully qualified and fully comprehensive, pervasive compassion.
Pena Debala Nianjun Kiaina, never join Nianjun Kiana, Aniqua Nianjun Kiaina, Debane Tandu Loki, then a come Gomali can do Legatua. That come Gomali come Gome Tabana, Sungabala Nianjun, Deba the Sungabala Nianjun Kiaina, yeah, Sunga calling Nianjun Makina, Sumekala give a Kuchetua. That comes from like Yaba June. Comes from the Dunga Tene, comes from like Yaba June, and Tabatobeki, and the Casadeta, again the Jangudwa. Tabatobeki, again the Jangudwa. And the Tabatobeki, the Jangudwa. That is what I can judge. Call the Dunga Ranshe, Ransing Matunga Bato, call a Tandu lot to get to Mudwa. Tandu lot to get to Mudwa. That is what did it? That the neighbor is what I can judge. Digital and you tell up than the Jerobocha Soete, round call cost you like some down there, and it's a caso the Missouri, Babu Yogusam, babu yoga some magic, babu yoga some magic, and the same share, call and natural miswebe, ninja get a corner yomaris. Ratabu, Rala Pa Jachin, and Missoba Kim the data, and a march, some shell and Missoba Kip which. Rata, Randu the neighbor Yenju. And the Shangala Pound, and the cause of the Ninja Chaturua. Ninja Chaturua. What did it? What did it?
So we develop renunciation. This is by really seeing through the kind of ephemeral nature of any kind of satisfaction in the desire realm, for example. And so we develop a sense of distaste around anything that the desire realm has to offer, and thereby generating a renunciation and wishing to get clear of that desire realm. And then we have access to the higher realms, be it the form or the formless realms, where the objective is to be able to deal with renouncing more subtle levels of suffering. And so one is able, say, from the point of view of the form realm, look on the so-called happinesses of the desire realm and feel no compulsion to take part. They see that as kind of like really passe. They don't have any feeling at all with regard to that. They have gone beyond that sort of attachment, and so it goes on. But of course, all of these realms, be it the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm, still exhibit their kind of attachments and still under the influence of cyclic existence. And so here, when we talk about liberation, we are talking about liberation from all three realms of existence. And this equates with a liberation from the cyclic existence. And that means that, once we have this understanding of all of cyclic existence being in the nature of suffering, only then can we feel the sense of the desire to gain freedom from that and thereby strive for liberation. As J. Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa has pointed out, he said, if on contemplating our own suffering, the hairs on our body do not, rise up out of fear, that we don't have that feeling of terror in that sense, then there's no way that compassion for others will arise when we contemplate their suffering. So what he's pointing to is that renunciation is a key step on the road to developing compassion for all sentient beings. And so renunciation is something that arises in relation to ourselves after our contemplation of how suffering impacts us. And then that mirror is then turned to all other sentient beings in order to develop compassion. So it's really, renunciation is what qualifies us to generate that compassion for all other sentient beings.
다 니지 좀 니버 개보 모두 니지 개보 모두 도고와 다 닝제데 동에게 나서 약본 좀 마시는 니지 다다시게 도고도 와 what did it say what did it
So the conclusion here is, of course, when we utter our aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, and we are expressing this, that bodhicitta attitude, that mind of enlightenment attitude, taking all sentient beings into account. But of course, the root of that aspiration is is compassion. It's compassion that feeds our mind of enlightenment, and that the more we have this direct relationship and understanding and realization of compassion, the more genuine that particular aspiration will be. And that, of course, relies on the degree to which we understand suffering.
다 수바 다 가서 잠대 쉬어이나 다 수바데 직과 첨부 주에 좀세다 디바사 디바 마장한다 제도 다 직과 첨부 주에 좀세 내서 자와래 기부 양라 최베사 데른 티바 제주대 가감미자 년라소 나래 신도 주나나 신제 번야 직제다 샤주 제제 순주제 직제 내제 탭주 바 라도 냠다 묘지 고르샤
And so we had stopped at a particular outline, really a subheading, the third of saying the reasoning behind why it is stated that great fear will arise. So this is in the context of having many negativities on the mind stream and not engaging in any kind of purification. That therefore great fear is definitely going to happen. And verses number 43 and 44 deal with this point. Petrified is the person today being led to a torture chamber with dry mouth and dreadful sunken eyes. His entire appearance is transfigured. What need to mention the tremendous despair when stricken with the disease of great panic, being clasped by the physical forms of the frightful messengers of death.
미 치바 제바 주에서 치바다 반테네 제조만 다가서 소소되와 메시로 다들 제조죠. 다 디가로 가려서는 아니 소소기다 다 타쳐봐도 다 신고 열어. 시어도 아니 카카바다 신기 단양바다 미자 냠발라 소바 나발레자 남주 신주도 좋아 나라스다 나다 미터 차고로다 배치 오지겠다 가소려 남사 치보 용거라 신제 번야 직지 다외 샤주 쟁게 소와 규정 지바 치보 치외 내지 태바조다 되게 치외 내 태원도 당가서 다 디바 치보 산의 치외 내 태원도 태바조 rab도 냠타고 지바 치보 요 메주고 그랬다 샤보가 지바 치보 용거로 와서 샤보죠.
So here the initial example is of an ancient kingdom, perhaps, where a king has sentenced a particular subject to a sense of torture. In fact, when it talks about the torture ground here, the torture chamber, and reflects on perhaps that the person is going to be dismembered and that they are being led, say we visualize that we are that person being led today to that place, we're pulled and dragged to that we know of what's going to happen. Our mouth is dry, our whole face is disconsolate, and we have sunken eyes, and our whole complexion has transformed. Because we know our whole situation has suddenly and drastically transformed, and that comparing this and then with the kind of fear that will arise when these fiendish messengers of death will come and grab us, and the great fear that comes with the great disease of death itself, and that when that befalls us, we can look forward. There's no kind of no need to talk about the great sense of despair and terror that will arise at that time.
다 간제 소소게 저기 가서도 다 치와도 다 제거해서 가요 말고 치와도 다 다쳐 잡았다. 다 디과 전부 싸바이나 아니 소소가 다 가서도 아니 걔네 다 디과 디다 tumbe 아니 걔네 녀바질에 깨줘나 아니 강에 쳐줘 뭐 다쳐 잡아라. 다쳐서 다 된데 저 세계 지바 이면 다 마시는 맛이 버려. 근데 하고가 다 쓰면 마소가 싶어 요야 봐. 다 신경 매바는 공몽배 온 거고 매바 계좌 말아. 그래서 몽바 온게 뭐마 줘 봐라. 다 된데게 릭tumbe 줄에 릭tumbe 되고 요바지 다 신경 요바 있나? 다 되도 하고가 다 미소가 싶어 요야 봐. 다 줘 봐라. 대수고요. 대수고요. 다 가자. 다고 마시바이는 마시바 좀 제도 매백게 잡아라. 고 마시바게 온게 다 머리뼈 온게로 마시바와 마시며 온게면 더 거기 매백게 잡아라. 다 그때 신거 여바이나 아니 딕바사 바디 아니 님부터 없이 거네 샤좀 제마도 바지 시바 이나다 다 되네 체표산에 아니 딕바 샤투근 그 류대지 레다도 야보데 말레바도 배제 다 줘서 버렸다 레니 바시고 사요바나 다 되네 이마이자 오다 아니 문에 집어치고 싶게 거 차기도 왔는데 하고 여바이나 다 되네 이마이자 다 하고나 저 마거나 딕바 제사베 잘라 샤 님부터 없이 거네 샤좀 제마도는 저분 영화 다 줘서 버려 아니 문에 미소바 싶게 레도 왔을 텐데 이마이자 다 샤투바 지고 그도 우승고 열었다 다 데려왔다
So these verses are really about kind of like getting real, and that you know, to kind of like the idea that, you know, oh well, you know, death is going to happen. It's for sure. So what? Big deal. No need to be you know, too concerned about that. But that might be fine if one didn't have great negativities on the mind stream. So this is what these verses are all about. And that if you die with these negativities on the mind stream, you're guaranteed that they will, you know, ripen into a result of a bad rebirth. And that you know, just because we may not be aware of the, you know, the details, it doesn't mean that this is not going to happen. You know, that the karmic cause and result is not something that is a respecter of persons of whether they are aware or even, you know, believe in it or not. That this is a natural law. This is what will come. If the causes are laid down, then the results in harmony with those causes, that is the likely result of these causes is something that will ripen. It is simply just because one isn't aware of it or doesn't know it, doesn't mean that it is rendered non-existent. And so this is something that we must become aware of. And so the verses are saying to you, you know, assume that you have great negativities on the mind stream, and apply the four opponent powers of confession and purification as best you can. In other words, they're saying do something about it now, because if you die with these great negativities on the mind stream, and then a result will definitely ripen, and it certainly will be a very, very terrifying and unpleasant result.
다른 가슴 내실라이 봐. 가서 딕과 사와자 다 유튜브 사와자 유튜브네 아니 세바 렘바 세바 숨게 쇠마다베 바즈라라다 바차가 전 대베 갑라 바차 전 대베 갑라 아니 샥좀 잖아 그 렐라보 거나 다 두고죠 다 유튜브에게 다 유바자샤 아니 데라 세바 렘바 세바 숨게 쇠답 사러와 쇠답 사도 아니 다 쇠답 쪽에 가서 다다데 가서데 쇠답 쪽에 다다데 쇠답 사쪽에 아니 소소 제부 가린 연구이나 이 탑시 시라 매버다. 근데 단단 거서 깨와 치마게 가지에 단단 쇠답 쪽에 쇠답에도 거기 딱 그래서 거서 시간 나가들라 아니 세바 레바 세바 속에 쇠답네 다 가서 소소게 딱 가서 레톱 치슈 질 쇠답 저거 요래. top chishu chile set up to yore ta top nga chikpa yena ani gagi nyala saina dila set up yore o ta ganje de ko tanda de kewa chima gaje da set up de yimba yesa ani tikwa gane cheba ne sha de yore ta set up sane ani gyuda ke yongzo chongsa de ani daga rangi dila tabshi sha me de ge 얘네 다들 처주에 튕길을 배주 당하지 얼마 다 삼도 당시나 dimme도 디 제보 녀망을 시부시부 제매 되겠지 어디 다들 내가 정말서다 개와 치마 배제 그때 다들 시부지 가서도 그거 다 라나메 봐 찾아도 되래
So as I was saying previously, in that we have these negativities on the mind stream. The causes have been laid down, and as is the case with any karmic cause that's laid down on the mind stream, it is waiting for these elements of craving, grasping, and existence that therefore, as it were, awaken this cause into the point where it is now ripening into a result, and that. So, for example, in these kind of imprints that are on the mind stream like this, if they are not affected in any way by our purification practice, whether lessened or eradicated by a decent purification practice, then they will awaken into their result. And that, once that process is underway, once that kind of ripening result has taken place, there's nothing we can do about it at that point. We just have to experience that suffering as best we can. And at the time of death, we say, how do we get into this life? And so we have to say the same process is happening, that at the very point of death, there's a particular imprint that is ripened or awakened through craving, grasping, and existence. That will be the karma that is most powerful, that is like first on the rank, as it were, and most powerful. That is going to determine, to a large extent, your future rebirth and the kind of life that will be. And so here, now, we have some power in our hands to actually try to determine what kind of imprint is likely to ripen at that point of death, and to thereby have a great influence on our future life. We know that we have negativities on our mind stream. That goes without saying. They're already there. And so we have to be able to do something now when we have the chance to kind of really lessen the chances that any one of those imprints will be the ones that are awakened at that time of death. And the only way to do that is to engage in spiritual practice, the practice of purification and so on, and virtue. And so it's really important to do that. No use praying, or may the result not happen. This is not going to influence the karmic law of cause and effect. That we have to actually do something about it ourselves to kind of to hobble those negativities before they have an opportunity to ripen.
Tende imbai za pena kasa de mi ji tonga laga tende imbai na mi ji ta tonga jobu tonga so ani khona la ji kasa de mi su ge ta ji khora ge nam ji jawa ya bo yo ba de so la ani ti sa la mandona ya bo yo de sta ji de khondo da shedan de ke ba ina ani ya le ni ba ji so de be ni ga yo ba ta de ya khora ge de ba yo ba ta bo de ta ga ne shin ge ji ge chue ge to ne ani sam lo le tab ji ya ta and Gawangmo to Jutop Chia, the Javana, and less Sambasava Magoyorba, the nature of Sotana, Kawachima, the lay, Kawa Yabus layer, Pendo, but this way negative. Tagadish meet John Sadu, John Sava Imba ya, and Tapena Casa the Shashujish Shagusugua, Tunja do 7 weeks, 7 or that, Tejedo, and the Penachavaina, and Chikaso the Shamba Barsiwate. Barsewa the Tete Shama do Tete Shama doing Kiava Marana Yanjo She Yanjo Bardula get the Yore. And Chick Shine Dapena Kora Kiava and Kora Pama Pinja, Drogo Dromo, and a Churro, and a Gagela Sobataka, and Sugar Tawata, Takari Tawa, the Tenega Tawa, you can so get, and don't see the Yakosuma Imbaina. Young Korante Penamash Shine. Kiawa was Yabu Mengangela because of the Patua the Kiava you might tea, Kine Mara Barashine Yang, this shit to the Ya, Selen Sebas search Tagura Tita, Kiawa Yambucha set up to now, then they can't get. Set up to now, Ya, Kiawa Yabule, Ravaja Yote. And the legend and go to in Airpota, Chita Barzi was in the Nimari Mabushiki Yorda, Yina, that Shabatuna had the Yomare. Yashi, Yang Bardola Kekio Marana. 양 바돌라 게 다간제 샤시주 샤고데 녀바디 깨와시 렌주고 요라 안디 이자 딘데게 깨와 약보주 용의 체도 아니 몰람 되해다 아니 다간에 디체도 깨와 두비에다 샬라 짐바타에다 아니 긴들을 뉴고 쉬에다 딘데게 아니 초바게 딘데 망부 지그래 디제 가서 아니 깨와 약보지라 아니 삼자 두에 체도 다 유코랑 사바 인고 그러와 유코랑 마사나 연구 말했대 이나야 다 수저 파마 빈자 조고 조모 쳐줘라 소바 기겐다 기도라 소바 다 근데 이마이나 근데 지게 아니 개와 두 잡아데 콜 레그 제와 제와 인자 야 개와 야고슬레라 누버테라 쇠타벨 펜토고 요바자 디지고 요바 딘내가 도서 되는 잡으러 딜레자 코란 최 켈레 말레 계자 가요 말 코란 최켈 말레 게 되는 이마 있네 나라서 개와 두배 있나 아니 레게 대와 요근도 개와 두배 있나 안 콜라 텐데 편도 연구요래 개와 약불레 해야 된다 가질라 코최 켈레 거요 마선 도나 지금부터 되는 계자 말해 코최 켈라 말레나 렌데 도로
So, for example, that if a person in a kind of like a traveler in a hotel is going there, they try to make a good connections, how to say, with other people, and that so that you can actually have that influence over somebody like that, making connections with people, making good connections with people, and that it is important to understand that, of course, there's a lot of virtue out there to be had as well, and to kind of lay down those virtuous causes, to influence others to try and lay down virtuous causes, and that can be very, very important. Very, very important, as we have pointed out, at the time of death, that when one dies, also that one enters into the intermediate state, the bardo state, and one will remain there for 49 days or 7
marda tak kete tak ta toma so tose tak nge discord pena michi ta pena michi ta ka chore pena donye den ke sa ba yina ane khorang la chala ane che khorang ge dewa yago medigen teso ane de mandona yaga sorch ka dewa yago medigen de doa yina tuwa yina ande nyomo kewa yina ane kewa jema de la nugur wata silent seba sunge sue tabegi le nyamba chelo sue tabe nyanga yorba what it is got ta koran da dewa yago yuge pena koran dewa yuge ta what da yana che ditla gyawang do gyuege jamba da ningje ketab da tendege ane samlo le ta go tendege jeba yina ane le sangbu chelo sue ta ne gyawa chama yago le jogo do.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No. Again, I was referring to the person who Shigala. Yeah. So, if, for example, a person is close to death or near death, that it is important there that that the people who are next to the person are going to be the ones who are likely to generate a virtuous intent, a virtuous mind in that person, so that it's likely that a virtuous imprint will be the one awakened at that time, at the very point of death, rather than those who may have too close a connection with them and be likely to generate other thoughts such as desire and so on, negative thoughts in the mind. One has to be very, very careful at that time of death to ensure that it is a virtue, a virtuous dharma that comes to the fore, and that and in that context as well, talking about and just after the point of that death, one enters into the intermediate state for 49 days, 7 weeks typically, and that one who has that good connection with that person, even after death, can have a very crucial influence over their future rebirth, even when they are going through the bardo state. This is because a bardo body It's very fragile and only lasts for a duration of 7 days, after which it undergoes a kind of a little death. And this happens then several times until the 49 days are passed.
Very nice people. Very expensive, about $1 more expensive for each.
So we can have an influence over that time by generating any kind of virtue. We can generate like through aspirational prayer, through acts of generosity, making offerings to the Asanga, triple gem, indeed any kind of virtue that we can do to and dedicate that virtue to that person who is now in the Dharma. And so it can have the crucial influence of influencing a positive karmic imprint to awaken just at the crucial stage when they're entering into one of those new intermediate state bodies in one of these little deaths. So, and that might then be key to their gaining positive rebirth in the next life. So it's kind of like very important, especially for those who are close relatives, very close friends, those who obviously have this then karmic connection with this person. This is very, very important point to consider.
간제 저 가서도 쇠 다가자 단다데 저와 가셔서 쇠다 쇠답서도 들려 뉴바시 제사로 아니디 가서도 답변에 내 야가 있나다 내 녀바 있나다 답변하는 거지 개와 두배서 내 상고를 쇠답에 지고 열었다 쇠답서도 아고 가서도 제부 가서 야부미엘라 지금 다 뉴바테 연구로 와 다가자 셀레스바 송고 쇠답서도 아니 거 제부도 가서 다 제보도 연구요. 다 되네. 다 되네. 이마인자 내가 disco다. 간저 내 녀바 짐바나 쇠 마타 wen게들라. 쇠 마타 wen게들라. 아니 거 샥돔 제도 거 뉴바차 연구도 와. 안 디인자 단다데 게치모지는 송에 가시나 왔다 간저 왔다 레사 사바 제도다. 아니 거저 오늘 전에 그 저가서 제보 용어에 뭐다 줘서 그래. 되네 인자 제보 용어에 그 마소 공원에 아니 샥돔 제보를 쓰고 열 왔다. So saying
is that there is some influence then, some power, and you know that whether a good or a positive or negative karma is going to awaken that time to influence that it to be a positive karma, so that a good rebirth is likely. One thing to understand is that once the imprint has been awoken or stirred into into the process of ripening, then the result is certain. And so that at that point, then there's nothing more that can be done. And so here, what is being emphasized is that although trying to influencing the karma of the intermediate being so that they will have a positive rebirth is very good and definitely worthwhile. What is more efficient is to purify the negativities on our mind stream prior to their it's going through this process of craving, grasping, and existence, and then awakening into that ripening, into that result. And so it's kind of like saying that there is this little opportunity here between the laying down of the cause on our mind stream and prior to it then ripening into a result, that we can do something about it. And therefore the process of confession and purification is absolutely crucial, and we need to really engage in confession and purification as quickly, as definitely, and as efficiently as possible.
What did it? That remember that said Dagarala, take the Palam Topsabaina, and what they would go about it. Tony was to Janju Semgula dem Becana, Tony was to the door, get Kasa Chasona, the Palam, take what you Palam Topina, talk any you go about it. Tipato Casara, Sir Tapsajoti, Sir Tapsajoti, your ticket. Tunga yon ticket. Ta in a Takarji or Sir Tapsara Tunga Junta Jota. Church of a twinkle pejuta. And a moment doing it, then my chat with Nibutoshi connection. So, Madame did Nibutoshi connection to Jeteridua. redwa ore ta so ta tsara dunga chonde ne ma giba jende na en so de jongor wa ta de chöjbe tengel beju ta kelle chöjbe tengel beju ta dana ne tsar wa ta ende en chagrwa
and Tsering gi paklam la
re ta
again
je pa ba dongning go som de do dongning go som de shara gyula geso na ani ta pera chedila dongning go som da ngune jana ta kaso de pera 쇠답 사교지 바이나다 그 동행료에 타치에서 봐 이바이나 야 돈이 고소도 싫어 줄라 대서나 안 용거 말이야
carry 용기 말
동행 용거 말 왔다 봐봐 가다다 치외 동네 전에 빵 소로 와 가와다 나와다 치외 동네도 용거 말이 소로 왔다 나 로아 그래서
And so it's to be noted as well that once one gains the Mahayana Arya path, in other words, one realizes emptiness directly and enters into the Bodhisattva, the stages of the Bodhisattva, that here one does not suffer. One doesn't experience suffering, particularly the suffering of the kind of like uncontrollable birth, old age, sickness, and death. That for us as ordinary beings, yes, we have to go through the process that once the craving, grasping, and existence have awakened that karmic imprint, we will have to undergo that suffering result. And so therefore, from our point of view, the key practice is to engage in purification, confession and purification according to the four opponent powers.
Shiva chima dunga dunga juzu ta gaja ta chiwe se de ta shiva ina ta ngabra yo ta jora wo de cha ta chima de gewa chima de la dunga ge ta kaso de nyambu to shigore shagdum chema do de kwa chimbo sawa ina nyambu to sha do chema do ina ani shiva chima dunga ge dunga juzu ne zawale sushi jikjin dele ta lebar gyoba jeju she desha chimbe migdene choshi jabda chowa choshi jamya tonjona dene kundu yimu gyuru nede gyabye mayena dese dage jidar chasa.
And the fourth of these subheadings is stated that how we are tormented by the thought of future suffering. And so verses number 45 and 46 talk about this point. Who can afford me real protection from this great horror? With terrified, bulging eyes agape, I shall search the four quarters for refuge. But seeing no refuge there, I shall become enveloped in gloom. If there should be no protection there, then what shall I be able to do?
세편에 아니 되게 가서도 다 가자지 냐와서 지켜와 이나 걔네 아니 냐외 순간에 통해서 기후스다 수시 직과 전부들다 레과 쪽을 제가 줄서 된다 다 되도 다 라와촌에 매대가 찾아라다 기후에서 다 우투베 쓰러 왔다 마이 갓 승 소리지다 지게서 라기도 왔다 강에 제가 어디 소리지래 수시게 아니 직과 전부들다 레과 쪽을 제가 줄서 신도 짜졌다. 아니 대샤 토메 미다 가바 세바 이네. 다 미된 초시 가바 때는 초시 잡다 초와 제라. 대다 제야 초시 잡매바 통내다. 대 수강 장은 요마. 되게 소소 레그 온거 차대로. 레그 온거 차대도 통내 되네 되나 군도 이무과 줄라서 아니 냐외 내대 지관래 좁에 잡요바 마이나 뒤에서 다게 지다자 다 된데 수간지 잡게 매봐이나 다 뒤에서 다 가르쳐도 지다자 탑지야 매봐 다다 된데 임바인다 다다 탑시 요래 다다 탑시 요바인다 아니 그러다 군조데 아니 가다 군조 숨라다 산자 군조 초 군조 진도 군조 산자 군조데 잡던 바보 초 군조데 잡고 진도 군조데 잡주베 다조 제네 제네 아니 다 가자 지금 잡수 전에 아니 다 가자 지금 탑 채고 그랬어.
And so here saying, these verses are pointing out really that when we pass away under the influence of powerful negativities where no purification has taken place, then we are headed towards a very harsh kind of a future rebirth. And here it's talking about being reborn in the hell realms, and where when we see the guardians of the hell realms, we are so terrified that we just can utter this kind of sense of like Dennis says, oh my God, as we say in English, or alas, some sense of a kind of an utterance of despair, really, and that is demonstrating the unbelievable terror that we are going through, where we, at a time when we need, really perfect protection, but that protection is completely absent for us. We're just really at the mercy, and so we are trembling with fear, terrified. We have, as it says, these bulging eyes agape, and that looking around in the four directions for any kind of help, any kind of refuge, any kind of protection, but not finding it, not seeing it anywhere. And so then we are, as it says here, enveloped in gloom. Despair really sets in, and that and this kind of fear that when we are in the hell realms like that, and that there is no protection for us. It automatically brings, to mind this sense of despair where, oh my goodness, there's absolutely nothing I can do about the situation. I am completely helpless now. And so therefore, from this on in, I need to really seriously take refuge in the triple gem, and the Buddha, who's the one who demonstrates Dharma to us, the refuge to us, the Dharma, who's the actual refuge, and the Sangha, who are those who exemplify and give us inspiration to engage in the path itself. And so this is what I have to do, and no doubt about it.
다들에서 레님바 톱 첨부 쉬우 사도 되게 다 지금 야외나를 지고 첨부 유에 되게 건가 어디바절 지금 미그 라제테 주샤바 되네 가야 말해 다다 소소 레게 나와게 네 차대잖다 베나 냐와게 메드 수간 속에 요 말 소소 레게 냐와게 메나를 개고게 제반 산예게 메나 개고 메드 소소 레게 오게 디베게 아니 그래서 디베게 아니 디바 사바 될라 때네 아니 디바 톱 첨부 쉬우 사발라 때네 아니 디 소소 레게 온게 아니 디 메다 레게다 디게 다 가서 레나게 차대와 저다 안 디바데 마세가 봐도 어디 내대 그래 다 디바데 세 차바다 와 아니 디가데 랑라 나데게 디게 메바 차버려 다 섬제 셔마 가리가라 코랑 게 레게 온게 줍대 와죠 야 디바절 소타 소라 챤데 메 디발 저기 컴퍼니를 챤 디발 운에 다네 두고 땅에서 되네 가야요 말이야 근데 계급 소소 이나되고 지금 폴리스다 먹미다 저들 라제테를 지어 봐 되네 가야 메드가 디가 소소 레게 온게 레니바 톱체 뭐 쉬우 사도 안 되네 차대지
So one has to understand as well that these hell realms that are so well described, and the guardians of the hells and so on, that these are all arising from your own karma, that those who have die with great powerful negativities on the mind stream enter into this reality whereby their own negative karma is giving rise to the beings that are seeing the environment around them, the fire, the guardians and so on. And these are all karmic appearances arising from your own karma. And so here it's important to understand that this is the case. It's not the case that there is some kind of solid reality out there where there are hired police and army people with weapons that are paid and so on to engage in torture, that this is not the case. This is your own karma giving rise to these karmic appearances. And they will remain like that until your own karma has dissipated or been kind of worn out. And so that the appearances will remain until that karma has not been worked out.
어디로 다디가 소소 leg walk 차대 차대도 어디로 저 다들 이번 인자 다 같이 지금 나랑 저게 월서 가수를 다 같이 저 레님바제 사요바는 딩어 트베 토네 아니 가수를 다 샥동치에 아니 책 다른 주가마다 토마 매바네 다 레님바 타여바 가서나 랑 셈비 샤완도 좀셈 녀모베 샤완도 좀다 셈마도 온글레 나 초바지 사네 그러와 또 먼저 다는 나도 한국어도 아니 지금 개와 두비알로 모두 된대게 아니 지금 삼로 센시티브 시라 매되게 딕바사에 미세 센시티브 사고도 와 나도 학고 되기도 아니 지금 녀모지 개고들고 중고 쉬우도 와 가네 이네 녀모법 좀 세고 누가시도 와다 개외 초지마다 그 당고 어지하고 얘네 전에 중도 저는 개시라 개게 문도 와 그래서 가르다 된거 열으나 토마 매바는 들라 공부시다 매베다 된거 열봐 그러잖아 개회 초들 잡된 거 참아 요래 누가 좀 보시지 요래 이내 나랑 쪽에 공배 온게 누가 민도와 다 미개회 초들 잡된 참아 요 말에 누가도 요 말이 때 이내 나라도 공배 온거 누가 숙식 보시지도 와 누가 좀 보시지도 와 다가랑이 뭐서 딕바 첨부 요바도 셔먹어 레니 뭐 보지 왔다 이내 다다 뭐서 답이 야가지래 깨왕가마 대바지라 아니 지금 수dim송 아니 지금 가서다 가자 수dim송 짐바당 팀비지 제네 아니 지금 아니 뭐하데 어지하고 제네 다다 미류대지 다가서 예수 잡여 소리지 다 홀리데이 레벨 소리지 예수 잡대베 소리지 된대지 국가 동동제 라바로 왔다 된대게 내가 지래 먼저 개와 제일 누가 매되게 딕바 사이를 누가 첨부 요등에서 다 디파 가네 문화도나 예수가 류대지 개반다 가리 용서를 가면도 왔다 차차도 왔다 다다 미류된 레벨 갈래 거들었다 지금 내다 약고지 삼로다나 개와 두위를 미스근 누가 충충인 게 당부 어서요 봐는 거네잖아 당부 어서 되는 야도 되는 누가 되는 매되게 당부 어서가 되는 약고 저도 봐 직대 취계를 더 되게 아니 다가서다 녀몽다 되게 되는 참에도 누가 샤 매기지도 와 이내 달로 판고 말해 이내다 거저 된대 아니 거저 슉 잡네 답비 다다 땅국으로 와 이내 거저 내 땅 삼로 땅한테 오늘 껴보지래도 와다 녀몽배 쳐지는 배 중고도 와 권다 생각이 먹고 삼로 땅 두고도 와 개회 쳐지는 규르부샤 되기면도 와 내가 가르다 되게 상관서 검바시라 매봤다 쳐보다 망치 녀몽을 검바 슉슉 보이다 세버려도 와 소소 칼로는 삼로 땅나
So it's good to take stock of, where we're at really in terms of how we deal with negativity on the one hand and how we deal with virtue on the other. And so we can say that it's important for us to gain an understanding of our own karma, what's likely to be our own karmic collection or pile, and to recognize it, to see what is negative in it, and to purify as best we can. And part of that process is to recognize that in the course of our duration since beginning this time, we have had a mind that has been under the influence of mental affliction, and therefore non-virtue or negativity is going to be predominant, not only on our mind stream, as kind of like in that kind of a cachet of negativity on our mind stream, but also in our mind now in this life. So, we can see this by the very fact of how we are so, as it were, fragile in sense of virtue, and so definite in our non-virtue, and how our virtue is so weak, diluted, and we cannot continue, have no kind of sense of continuity of that, but so easily that we can get into a powerful negative state of mind, and that can last and be fertilized kind of endlessly by our own negative thinking. And so this is it may appear to be kind of like a how do you say, wrong in a sense, because virtue is something that is backed up by valid reasoning, whereas non-virtue negativity is not backed up by valid reasoning. And so why is it that the non-virtue negativity is so much more prevalent and powerful in our minds than virtue? The result can be alarmingly simple, and that is through just habituation. It's just habit that keeps us so in thinking so negatively all the time, and that this is what we have to deal with. So in a situation where we're at now, when we look at somehow we've engaged in some ethics and generosity and other virtues that have led to this human rebirth. And it's like it's like in a sense of overall through all our rebirths since the beginning of this time, this is like a little holiday, a little break in the normal course of events for us, this rebirth as a human being. And so now, if we kind of like maintain the status quo of a very weak kind of sense of virtue that cannot be added to or strengthened, and that we are always under the influence of our more negative states of mind or negative attitudes, and generating more negativity willingly, easily, without even having to think about it much, and then that would be an absolute disaster. This holiday of a human rebirth would be completely wasted and very tragic. And so it's kind of like here we've got to use the opportunity. We've got to see the true significance of having this human rebirth with this capacity to distinguish between virtue and negativity in the first place. And therefore, to see that we are in a great position to really make a powerful kind of difference to the whole arc of all our lifetimes, and therefore to kind of like really recognize that my propensity for virtue isn't really up to scratch. It's very weak. I cannot sustain it, and I kind of find reasons for kind of avoiding it. And so you really start analyzing this, and therefore bringing more virtuous thoughts into mind, making them better, making them more stable, making them more common and lasting longer. And in other words, you're doing a lot to improve the chances of virtue in your life. And so it's very, very important. And as well as that, of course, the other part of that equation is to take stock and be absolutely clear about the influence of mental affliction in this life, and to understand also that mental affliction is not just as kind of like an adventitious sort of entity, but very smart, working on us from morning till night to bring forward, this kind of negative thought into the forefront of our thinking all the time. And so we kind of really have to work on that by purification, confession, and purifying much more. And that and kind of really promoting our virtuous thoughts more and more.
딱 간제 지금 나라주 내다라 때는 그런 뭐 쳐야도 요래. 이래 당가서 남주 도나 지금 말아. 도나 출월 제라. 디 지금도 지금도 나라주 시작 칼로고 말아. 딱 나라주 칼라는 소소 니샤 투치게 아니 나다 낭바리에 택바 첨보리에 디게는 상가 도지 택바 켈랭게지레 아니 데데 냠네 지기 위해서 괜지레 왔다 데데 지도 도나 야고 제바이나 아니 다 지금 청문회 뒤에도 누누 아니 이마대 비다고 매게 다 괜찮지 자기도 한테 가릴 따는 저 가릴다서나 가릴 전에 연거서는 가라도 그가서도 녀모 검시 축처부 여자 녀모 쳐대 남남 수그 저 최고 쳐대 아니 그 지 남남 슈 저데 코 요바다 배준 전마다 데 제원도 안 간사서는 양 지가서데다 그 지겐 추게게 당 된데게 아니 파칼리칼리칼리칼리 안 쳐마이 버스 쳐마이 버처를 슈체데 체데 줘대지 차되기도 와 나고 제시가 쓰면 강투도 맞지바이나 어디 가르다 되고 생각을 토마메바네 디바 쳐보 요바 엔디 온게 용되게 요바 용되게 요래 용되게 요래 근데 남자 지 강에 체도 카나다 랜드에 시에다 강에 체도 랜드 삼 라도도 그 지금 모두 지금 남자 출로를 주고 줘야지도 어떻게 레그 되고서 남자 로를 차투고 도 데 참아도 가려서는 아니 보다 건배 온게 차고도 건배 온게 차고도 보다 어떤 데들 요다 다 이거가 거기 랭이베 되고 이번에도 쓰고 싶어져 봐 안 딜레데는 다 딜레데는 다 가서다 가서다 가자 가서다 다 딜레데는 다 가자 소소라 찍어 류고톤에 동네만 보죠 것도 아니 샘고톤에 동네만 보죠 것도 봐 좋아 어디에 용것도 봐 가서 삼로당다 마시는 용되기도 봐 어디가 랭이베 되고 이번에 다 쳐버려 왔다 수관을 깨져 주고 말해 랭이베 되고 동네 이번 잘랐다 랭이베 되고 이번 다 쳐라 다 쳐버려 어디들에도 어디에 인도 딱 앉아 지금 아니 지금 다 시작dom지에 개천버려도 딜레데는 다 키라래 딱 먼저 지금 쉐두벨라 누바신보 메게 아니 지금 영몽 배철고 누바신보 예도 오다 맞아 어쩌버터 오다 오늘은 시작돔 제국도 다 삼성 어쩌버 셴네 아니 체딜 점박가서 마점박가서 요래 안다가네 이제 경험만 하고 다시 먹어버려 오다 이거 시작돔 셴네 딱답 제국도 어디에 싫어 가서는 레사사도 바자샤네 아니 로티다네 봄다보도 내되고 레 가셔다까지 다다 로스 레사네 남셰도 바자샤 아니 데레전다 가서도 다디 게임 하데데 하데고 레마고 싶죠 아니 니리 니마데 레다 봄차 먹고 싸고요 봐 상보 도도다 용거를 때 먹고 레 녀버렸다 가서 녀버려 어디를 차대요 안다가는 이제 탑에 귤다 탐제 캠에 귤을 것도 빼 공부를 와 탑에 귤을 줘발라 돈이 도배 셔라고 승고래 아니 탐제 캠에 귤을 줘라 장주 승고 승고다 또 공부를 와 레상고 또서 얘네 코에 디기 귤자면도 용문도 와 뭐다 되대래 다 이거 뭐좀 어쩌봐 제는 아니 샥돔제 레상고 사다 안디야 레상고 사바데 아니 코에 교자 말을 저 타바다 탐제키베 귤을 조금 레상고 사 돈이 도배 셔라다 장주 승고 쓰면 돈을 레상고 사예 어디든 사예 아니 레 녀바디게 돼 아니 요바도 뭐처베 돈에 아니 녀부터 없이 거나 딱답지에 어디든 남고도 어디든 셔
So looking into, our particular situation here, where, it's kind of like important to recognize that, really be honest about the influence of negative thinking in our day-to-day existence, that so much occurs to us where we're kind of only half aware of, or even don't pay attention to the kind of negative thoughts, even negative actions that we engage in, that it's so pervasive in our whole life. That we kind of almost don't even notice it anymore, and that that this shows the extent to which we are overcome by the habitual way of living. We're dominated by habit. We are creatures of the habit, and that we may see ourselves as Buddhists, even as tantric practitioners, or engaging in the Dharma and so on, but that because of this inability to even pay attention. That we on one hand engage in some sort of formal spiritual practice, but we don't recognize the degree to which the mental fictions have control over our thinking. And so all the effort we make may be just working within the 8 worldly concerns, and thereby the Dharma that we think we are doing becomes non-Dharma. And so this is very, very important, that to get realistic about it. Not only that, but at the level of result, that we have these causes. These causes are being laid down on our mind stream, and the results are inevitable unless something is done about them. And so here, you know, to kind of like understand the mind itself, the minutiae that go on in the mind, to kind of the level of mindfulness that's necessary for us to kind of like really take it for granted that this habitual negative thinking is insidious, it's pervasive, and that we need to understand too that it is laying down the imprints on our mind, you know, at a very, very alarming rate. You know, hundreds and thousands of imprints are being laid down on the mind stream all the time. And I take it into consideration that this has been going on since beginning this time. You can start to gain an understanding of the kind of burden that you're bearing in your mind stream now at this point. And that is just from before, but let alone what's been laid down in every moment of your consciousness, even now. And so it's kind of like really understanding that is there, that this is going on, and that the law of cause and effect is definite. So if causes are laid down, then results are going to happen. And so you really have to really say that I have to engage in the process of confession and purification. And I have to see it as being absolutely vital to any kind of positive future that I can look forward to. So you're recognizing that the power of the negative way of thinking, the weakness of our virtuous way of thinking, and that this then process of purifying negativities on the one hand is absolutely crucial, and that is complemented by really habituating to virtue on the other hand, more and more and more, and start really changing the course of how these imprints are laid down on the mind stream, or what kind of imprints are laid down on the mind stream. And so this is the process, you know, and we're aspirating, our aspiration is to attain the state of enlightenment, the state of omniscience, of an enlightened Buddha, in order to be a benefit to all sentient beings. And so it really behoves us to engage in this twin process with a great deal more sincerity and deliberateness, that, you know, purifying as much as we can, as efficiently as we can, and taking every opportunity to habituate to a mind of virtue. This is so important for us.
그 최고라 많이 받잖아요. 소소 미다도 최지기도 삼사요다. 이제 최 많이 받자되기도 와. 대대에서 최세도 아니 세디 아니 저 가서다 삼로다 맞게 주고도 와. 세디 삼로서 세디 디기 중도다. 아니 담 중도다 냐다 용도다. 대대 삼로라 치바이나 소소 최지기요 삼로데 최 많이 받자도 와. 최 많이 받자도 와. 다 대대 이바이자 어디 벤샤샤버에 기부 충무주 벤에 먼저 개치주의 람르블 투바 차기도 참모도 개치고 싶지래. 근데 이바이자 그 세디게 아니 삼로 세베톤에 량어도 그 소소 다 저거 검다기나 가르치고나 지바당고나 가르치고나 거기가 그 지대 최적의 상황도 치마이나 되게 돼. 아니 그 기부 충무주야 자기면 봐. 기부 충무대 먼저 고마투에게 아니 둘러 조금 고고요 봐. 아니 기부 등데 먼저 고마대야 아니 코아차들 아니 코알에 땐데 되게 아니 년주가 세베 거네 아니 제와이나 딱 가서데 기부 등기 초과 차기요 봐 소주 최주에 아니 다 대제와이나 타이어마게 심제 탐제 판토도 면도 대대 임바 인자 심제 탐제도 산제 고마 주베치도 다 제와이나 아니 대원게 지바당 와이바이네다 소바콤바 이바이네다 카르체바이나 탄지케메 귤로 도디고 봐. 나간자 조데 철라 조먼도 아니 최대 태과 쳔부고 최차다 마차 지가 건가 꿀로를 알려 되고 봐. 다 세디 아니 시험도 치마이나 그 최호라 많이 받쳐줘도 안 되는데 되게 된가 안 최마이 받쳐줘도 아니 다 소소 최지구에 삼사시나 다 최마이 받쳐줘는 다 경험 잡아라 다 경험 잡아라 다 되게 나가서 지금 뭐 트베 토네 다 간제 저기 남고에 계시 버려도
So for us, it's very, very important to be, how do you say, absolutely clear on where our motivation lies, why we are doing what we are doing. And so, when we engage in this, in Dharma practice, whatever that Dharma practice is, whether it's a ethical conduct or a practice of generosity, that we must avoid the 8 worldly concerns at all costs, because if we are mixed up with that, then whatever Dharma we think we're doing becomes non-Dharma. It's nothing at all. And it may look like somebody engaging in virtuous activity, but if the mind is filled with sort of any sense of attachment to this life, and then it's not Dharma at all. And so here we must start with doing what we are doing without any attachment to the affairs of this life. This is primary, because even if we want to engage in the practice of the smaller capacity being, their main motivation is to attain a further rebirth in a future life. And so it's kind of like that is the starting point of what counts as spiritual practice. And so if we're still only doing what we're doing in order to enhance in any sense our life in this life, then it doesn't even count as spiritual practice. It's very, very important to understand this distinction. And so that the person of medium capacity has expanded that motivation to attain the sense of liberation from cyclic existence altogether by recognizing clearly that it is in the state of, it is in the nature of suffering, and that nothing can really ever come out of maintaining any sort of rebirth in cyclic existence. So one wants to do away with that altogether and attain liberation. And the person of greater capacity seeing that this is even the person who wants to attain liberation for himself alone is not taking into consideration at all the benefit to all sentient beings, and that this cannot be ignored. And so they are very consciously and conscientiously sustaining a motivation in their practices of simple generosity and ethical conduct and whatever other virtue that they're doing, with that motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So it really transforms that simple looking practice into something that is at its most powerful and efficient, because it has the bodhicitta motivation behind it. And so it's important that we engage in whatever virtue we're doing for that sake as well, and even the purification we're doing with that motivation, and not to see the faults of in some way engaging in generosity or any other virtuous practice whilst being motivated for some sense of gratification or recognition or anything else in this life, and seeing the great fault in that.
데데데데 최케 말랭가 전에 곧 내주 로가래 그 소주 최케 랭게지 아니 소주 지당을 전에 아니 최 많이 봐 잡아이나 방보로 와 다 데데 임바서 다 데데 이상도 지단에 나라도 몸배 오게 녀바 먹고 싸고 요래 다가는 정도 최인 삼사데 최 많이 봐 차네 녀바 먹고 싸디기도 와 다디가 그 녀바서 타 녀바 주에 되게 유도 안디가 동도 뭐 주베잖아 아니 샤동 제네 다간자 지금 아니 샤동 제데 다간자 개침버려도 와 그래서 나 데델 때네 아니 초봉을 내서 최 지구 요사 최켈 랭거지 아니 최 많이 받지 제도도 아니 그 초봉을 내서 두고 와 초봉을 내서 두고 와 왔다 데데지도 그 네바 자체 뭐저 최 두고 요사네 아니 네바 쳐볼 싸우나 다최 멤버 돈에다 네바 싸우요 최 두고 요사네 최 두다 마시네 네바 싸더나 다들 통보지로 와 소도 최지가 유 전제 뭐다도 내가 그네에 용해도 왔다 이거다 제시 바유 된제네 전바의 시신기 아니 바유 된제네 아니 내가 되게 숙소도 충도 전에 매바 쏟다 당분에 매바 차도 용거 말고 그 뭐처배도네 아니 내가 숙충도 충다 내가 사디게도 내보도 주거는 샥돔 전에 딱답지야 답시 제보고도 근데 임바자 오다 되게 아니 랑게 아니 저거 단다디 내가 다에게 내보도 없이 거는 냠내 지에겠다 그거 약속돼 임바 인자 아니 저 가서대다 간제 내보도 없이 거는 샥돔 전에 어디 간제 지자다 내보도 없이 가서다 나뭐 순지부터 아니 가서 땡겨도 아니 가서대 내보고도 주베도 아니 내발라 라토베도 스톱시 왜냐 다단다디 내보 가서다 나뭐 순지부터 어디든지 차베서 지바체 단지바 땡겨도 없들라 숨제나 다다니나 구조숨라 아니 잡소 땜바 아니 몰람게 또 위게베 셀라 땜바 잡소 손에 대다자 가신도 두바고 오잖아 삽자 숨고대체.
So of course we can normally say that in general practices of generosity and good ethics and so on are very good. They're very good practices, and that it looks like really good Dharma practice. But of course it depends on the motivation behind all of these. And of course for those who don't accept any spiritual practice, then whatever generosity, etc., that they engage in is their own business. But when we are, have accepted a spiritual path that we are engaging in Dharma, then it's sort of saying that we really need to ensure that whatever virtue we are doing we're doing it at its maximum of efficiency, which is the purest motivation that we can muster. And this is the twin process too of ensuring that on the one hand, we have the most profound motivation behind any virtue that we're doing, but that ensures also that there's no chance of any of the 8 worldly concerns creeping into our motivation as well. That's very important. And so we can see that those who accept a dharmic path, then it kind of behoves them to really take it seriously and to kind of recognize clearly the actions that they're doing, why they are doing them, and to understand that the process of confession and purification is central to dealing with the negative tendencies in the mind, and to understand also that when we have accepted a spiritual path and have certain commitments and so on, that when we don't do them, or we do them but in a way which is kind of like very slack and kind of polluted by the 8 worldly concerns, then that's not only sad in a sense, but it's also accumulating a very serious negative karma called the karma of abandoning the Dharma. And so this is something that we need to avoid. And that though great virtue is there for us as an opportunity for us when we engage in good spiritual practice, but the converse of that is that when we are very poor in engaging in our spiritual practice, that we can be open to accumulating this very serious negativity. So it's very, very important that we in general cultivate a sense of conscientiousness, of mindfulness, of alertness, is always kind of a checking our motivation for whatever we do, and to really see that we have this opportunity, this best opportunity to engage in, for example, the practice of using the 4 opponent powers to purify the power of really looking into all the different ways in which we have negativities, looking through the power of the basis, the power of applying all of the antidotes, and the power of really uprooting all negativity and avoiding engaging in those negativities again. When we really look into nature, we have this great opportunity with this practice of the four opponent powers to conscientiously purify negativity, and at the same time using our conscientiousness, mindfulness, and alertness in any virtue that we are engaging in. So we're looking at the second of these opponent powers now, the power of the basis here, and this has three subheadings in the text. And it says, so therefore, it says, we rely on refuge in the triple gem. 2, we rely on the children of the conquerors, who are the objects of our powerful aspirational prayer. And thirdly, having gone for refuge, then how to engage in a perfect practice. So the first of these.
아니 야 군조라 때는 여사야다 심jel라 때는 여사사 유니 차티는 거와 근데 인자 군조 때는 여사야티 다 가서 여사야티 잠도 그때 다도야다 아니 심젤라 때는 여사야티 아니 장주가 셈 고바이나 셈께바이나 셈제가 냠내 잡아이나 바다도에도 다 내가 지금 남겨 손대기도 와다 됐는데 인다저와 와다 되는지 다 니바 다다의兄弟 나를 잡아나 다 가자데 땡그 돕들라 숨제나 다다니나 군조 숨을 잡대 봐 아니 가서다 멀람게 돕게 자게왜 셀라 땜봐 아니 오래 잡도 셈게지 셀라 땜봐 잡도 손에 다자 같이 도와고 당분이 자와래 대외 겨와 저거 도와줘면 된저 도전지와 군사와 대리님 가서 대리님의 접수체 대의 두두 주변에 고여지는 세워다 자주 세워 돌아야 대시 야다 접수체.
And so then looking into the first of these subheadings, that therefore relying on going for refuge to the triple gem. And in short, when we talk about the power of the basis, it's referring to the basis of the triple gem, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and the basis of sentient beings. And because it is towards the triple gem and sentient beings that we engage in our negativity. So therefore, it is in going for refuge to the triple gem and in generating the mind of enlightenment in relation to sentient beings that we can start the purification of those particular negativities. So this is the explanation of the power of the basis. It refers to refuge and bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment. And this is looked at in verses number 47 and 48, where it says, therefore I now seek refuge in the Buddhas who protect the world, who strive to shelter all that lives, and with great strength eradicate all fear. Likewise, I purely seek refuge in the Dharma they have realized, that clears away the fears of cyclic existence, and also in the assembly of bodhisattvas.
아니 디린이네 잡수 쳤다 디리 다다네 잡수 송이스 잡수 치신 아니 개와디 투 개와디 투수 추가 다 개와디 투줄을 유바 투줄은가 왜 아니 최 때나 코웨지바 세베 최군조 라도 최군조 다 투줄을 다 고대다 람대학 수요라 최군조다 최군조다 파베 공바 공바 예배 파베 공바 예배에서 파베 공바 예배 파베 공바 토베에서 다 자주 셈베错了呀근데 다 되게 고된다 dede kasada da kasada da toni moson to be shera gula tembesa gula tembe tembesa da gula tembe jaju sembe chola ya deshe da jaju pabe cho la ya deshe do yang da ba japso da ne shi chene yang da ba japso is da japtu be da to su is sanje japten ba chö jap and jin jap to be da to so and da ne jap chi wo shi ba wo che.
And so the explanation then is that, following those reasonings, then I go for refuge to the conqueror, who is the protector of the world, the one who offers refuge, who strives to work for the benefit of others, to protect them from all fears, and through their own power, they have the capacity to eradicate all fears. And so to them I go for refuge. And to the Dharma, and that is in the mind stream of those conquerors, who exemplified by true cessations and true paths in the mind stream. I go for refuge to the jewel of the Dharma, which has the capacity to eradicate the great fear of cyclic existence, and also to the Arya Bodhisattvas. And then these who, again, in the embodiment of it, who have those particular cessations, the true cessations and true paths on their mind stream, having realized emptiness directly, they have attained that state of the Arya being, those Bodhisattvas. And to that whole assembly also I go for a refuge.
What is that? Niwa Nolam Gotobi, Gewesela Tebanis, Gewesela Tebani, Tani Chiwa Namdane, Kudos, Sala Tani, Chambeyala, Tani, Tagalu, the Uati, Tujuva, Matube, Cheres, Delaya, Namtangaru, Dupu, Tijantala, Jabdos, Pavana, Nibuda, Say, Nibudadan, Tujago, Tangela, Jabun, Dupu, Kashitona, Shija, Panel, Lasso, Tawana, Tane, Cho, Shi, Jejeva, Dojichala, Jabso, Cheers, Jabso, Chich.
The second of these subheadings was then relying on the children of the conquerors, who are the powerful objects of aspirational prayers, verses 49 to 52, where it states, I, trembling with fear, offer myself to Samantabhadra, to Manjughosha also I make a gift of my body, to the protector Avalokiteshvara, who infallibly acts with compassion, I utter a mournful cry, please protect this negative doer. In my search for refuge, I cry from my heart for Akashagarbha, Kashitigarbha, and all the compassionate protectors, and I seek refuge in Vajrapani, upon the sight of whom all harmful beings, such as the messengers of death, flee in terror to the four quarters.
That is a new number good done that Jendig Lane Basa Devati, that the Shaktom Jamajo, the Danian Richiva, and that the Mutu in your teacher, what it is, and Tagado the cousin labor, Casa Tivasani, Naming the Wing Yasola Java, that Java Jedu, and no what you did that Dante is a diet, Lado the Java Judo, Mutu, Yasola give you to what I do again, net out of Tonetta, but Casola, Sawan and Tava Majuma Ina, Yan, Naming Debu de Matawa Ina, Tachima Ina Yan, because of the Java Judan that did young Mutu the less side than you would want. Less side than you would want. That to get the tone that the land again, Dotan to get the tone, and it's got less sasa to tell Yati. Good naming it was some my butter, and the nigger ya tonea, what Jabatu, the nigger Mongujo or the Noa to Jabatu to the nigger, Mutu the table you want to Tina Shia, Mutu the science you want to get to that the shame at Tonetta, but someone in a tower to take to substitution, tanning and rich one jigwe, number good of Tanya, Santa Rata Tanya, Molam top jengies, Molam get top JVS, good at Molam get to the water, the JVS, good sample, Tani pushing, that good sample, and that's so that 가서 다 다니 뷰네 그러다 전에 뷰네 다 간자 콩 뷰네 뷰서 다 콩이 다 콩을 뷰네 다 콩이 지다와시도 콩네 신지에 쳐서 간자 들이 다 간자 제들이 어디를 전 콩이 제반이 제투예지 야 뷰네 뷰싱 다가는 잠배장라 다니지서 선바 다외 다게 류디 우아기 워스바 다외 다게 류디 우아죠 다 코나족의 심지가 된주에 튕겨를 하고 있네 와 피나다 어디죠 우아기 워스 아니 그 투제주와 마투베 권에서 도에 된제는 파바체레스 고불라야 파바체레스 원줄라야 집에 냠타베다 그 마루 연도 별로스타 백잡도스에서 연도 별다 원도 별다 잡로체서 연도 별도죠 안 수지다나 다 그래서 라바이나 수 그래서 지금은 딕된 달라 잡수 샤보다 딕된 다 디바요 되게나 안 잡수 시스타 잡어도 추가 제로치스 잡도 수 샤보고서 대신도 파반난 게 님보다 사이 님보다 잡아다 디바나세스 소다 자세 파베 초 투지 치보고 탐제라 아니 잡수 쪽이 있어 잡수신 니네 원도 페베서 다 잡로지스 접시 차나 도지에서 강제 통나 신제 포냐라서 봐 셈제라야 당완는 땅에 초시 제바 집에 도지절라야 접수 치고서 어쩌죠
And so here, one is really calling out these great objects of our aspirational prayers in order to go for refuge. So understanding really the great fear of being reborn in the lower realms, and the fact that I have all these powerful negativities on the mind stream, and I haven't engaged in any purification, that I am bound to experience these various negative results. And so here it's kind of one is conscious and aware of the fact that one will have the ripened result of whatever rebirth one takes, and then the kind of the kind of results that it kind of guarantee a continuous kind of rebirth in a similar negative kind of state, such as the results that are contingent with the cause, the action cause and the behavioral cause. In other words, that ensure that one continues with the habit of negativity that keeps one being reborn in negative states. And so it's kind of like one is talks about that trembling with fear in verse number 49. This results from being cognizant of the impending and definite disaster that is about to befall one. So that not only the ripening results that will ripen, but also that the results that in line with the causal action and behavior, that this will guarantee a continuation of that kind of negativity. So in that sense, with these aspirational prayers, we pray to these who are powerful objects of our aspirational prayers, such as Samantha Bhadra. I offer myself. And so it's really saying here, I am changing my ways, and from here on in, I will emulate the way in which you have engaged in practice. So this sense of offering myself means I will do as you have done. You will be my guide and example. Likewise, when it talks to Manju Gosha, Manjushri, so I'm offering my body and mind to you in that same sense, to the one who's always unmistakably acting out of great compassion, Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara. I cry out from the depths of my own misery to please, allow me to emulate the way you have practiced as well, and to kind of saying, please ripen the conducive conditions for me to be able to sincerely practice and put aside all my fake practice and engage in genuine practice. And here is saying, really, please protect this one endowed with such negativity. It's really being open and confessing clearly, one endowed with this negativity. And likewise, to the great Arya, Akasha Garba, Kasiti Garba, Maitreya, And all those greatly compassionate ones who have completely eradicated all obscurations, I make these prayers. Please offer me refuge and protection. I cry out from the heart. And so likewise to Vajrapani, who is that fearsome that upon seeing him, all of those who are negative, such as the messengers of the Lord of Death, those fiendish negative ones, they themselves feel terror and flee to the four in the four directions. And so to the one who's the holder of the Vajra, I also go for refuge.
다 군도 상보 초라 다니 빌스 다 먼저 소소기 랑의 룽아 이스의 계세 다니 첨부 다 퓨어 소라죠 다디 가서는 계세 다니 첨부게 다 간저 퓨스도 다 소소기 다 내가 소소기 계획 삼다 하여마다 야 퓨스도 다 코나 속에 안에 다 신년 주베게 안에 다 배주 당사 소라 잡으러다 안데 다 소소 랭게의 가려서 랭게데 장주 선배 주변 냠내 지에들다. 시안의 편바 주변 딱 간저 다 단다보다 나선 제부 지에디. 다 야피사도 나서 앞서 하여만 다 당보잖아. 야피 다 코나족에 아니 현재 주변에 다 튕겨서로 차주고 봐. 튕겨서로 차주고 다 이내 다 소소 다 디인데 피터 다 가르치고 그랬어. 다 소소 랭게인데 코나족 능신절 강 뚝뚝기. And
so in those verses where it talks about the way we offer ourselves to Samantha Bhadra, for example, here the idea of offering is that we are offering our whole selves, our body, mind, continuum, body, speech, and mind, just like they have done. And to offer why? To what? For what purpose? For the benefit of others, to work for the benefit of others. And so this is the commitment that we are making when we say, I offer myself to Samantha Bhadra, to Manju Geshe, etc. And so what that commitment means is that we are generating the mind of enlightenment and then engaging in the practices thereafter when we have generated that mind of enlightenment. That's what it means, because that's what is working for the benefit of others looks like. And so this is what we're doing. So it's Kate saying, after we state these lines where I offer myself like that, one is kind of saying, okay, now there is nothing for myself anymore. No more thinking of myself, no more self-cherishing. That is contradicting what I've just done. I've offered all of what I have to work solely for the benefit of all others. And so therefore, I have to see this as my commitment. And let's leave it at that for today.
Yeah. 다 남준의 시제는 어디다 랑도 또 랑이 지워라 빼면 님만 다외 좀 가지고 공부하셔. 안데 년주 자세 양답에 또 전대체 아니 데다 받자 라마로 다게 지워보다 그래 고수도 용으로 찾아서 수대자 담비 가서 배 니베 가서 수배 가서 때도 산제 고마마도 보다 제 소소 선의 가고 안디 야라도 만데다 지워보네 어디다 지금 공부하셔.
So again, let's finish as we normally do. Doing the practice. So we bring our attention to the figure we have in front, and also prepare a lotus, sun, and moon disk mandala seat on our own crown by reflecting on renunciation, and the emptiness and the mind of enlightenment itself, to make manifest those concepts as the lotus, sun, and moon disk mandala. And uttering the invocation verse, so glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seed placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness, bestowing me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. And we do that thrice. At the end of the first, the figure moves from the space in front. At the end of the second, they have arrived at our crown. At the end of the third, they are seated steadfastly there until we ourselves attain the state of enlightenment. And we have a great sense of joy that this is the fact of the matter. and we make the offerings of our 7-limb practice and a mandala offering.
Then rangi ning de and pema tabje chela chu de de nima dawe king ko kombashe de nenjo chase yang de ta chunde cha then pande zawe lama de mate dagi ninga be de kan ku so to ngur sa so de chene chibode ma chene ka so de ta lama sha je se chibode ma chene and rangi ninge yoso pema tama jaba nima dawe king ko de do shu so sa cha tabu ko so pe ni ko shu so de 사제 고마도 맞죠 손가고 때네 니뼈마 답제도 가마 마인도 좀네 엔데 나균닝 내다는 시 엔디가 도체 가고 짱가 봐 체가지 가제 되겠죠 엔디 다고도 또 매장가 다이도 엄무는 뭐 다이도 엄무는 다이도 엄무는 근데 이게 되고 되게 고마셔 때네 자매가 서 엄마 알아봐서 나 디디디디디디디디디 때려서 고되게 고마셔 때네 가서데 때den가 오면 예다마 해도 잡아 따다가 마샤만에 때den가 숨거든 rangi nigu so lama shaja sangati kusum tola wesetune rangi chibone kantiga pala wesetu ana thoma meba sa tiba ta tiba ta jama changso sasaja so chiba ma jemba leba mi sama chiba an zuyu chama zizong ga ja naksen lokdala soma ta kanja chebe khana ma to ba da rashe khana ma nyaba kanti sa ma changshen tama choso sansa ta ni so ta to ba do janjo se ba laba da kawa sanga ge tamse da kawa 켜보다 로벨로 마구발로 소나 다가제 이제가 근데저 싸워이나 마 장시다 하도도 다가제 가서 류기 초주베 게제 아니 류기 아니 저거 류다 생베 아니 류기 나자 생베 동해라 소마 가리유데 장시다 아니 중시 코면이 중시 코요 자롱 틸레 견데는 견디게데 장 아니 다가지 워데자 아니 다가제 가나탄제 다바람자 바시 차예게 아니 차에게 아니 깨끗이 파장네 안배 뉴도 산제 공부하더라 타면 나시 괜찮고 타면 나시 괜 탐자 파장 나 야고 싶은 중수 선서거든데 고바시.
And then we begin the process of establishing the lotus sun and moon disk mandala seeds at our own heart center. Again, reflecting on renunciation to bring forth the lotus moon disk mandala on the correct view to generate the sun disk mandala and the mind of enlightenment itself to generate the moon disk mandala seed. And then uttering the invocation verse thrice again. O glorious and precious root Guru, come take the lotus and moon seed placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first, the figure at our crown begin to journey down through crown chakra into the central channel. And then at the end of the second, they have arrived to take their seat at our pre-prepared seat at our heart center. And at the end of the third, they will remain steadfast there until again we attain the state of enlightenment. Again, we rejoice, and again we offer the 7-limb practice and mandala. And then the 4 petals of the lotus fold over and are sealed at their tips by a 5-pronged white mantra. And then that package of the leaves is surrounded, encircled by the 3 mantras. The first in a clockwise direction being the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha. The second being the mantra of Manjushri or Marapatsanadeep. And then that is in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination again in a clockwise direction. And then from within those the leaves, the light rays, countless light rays emanate from the body of the Buddha within, permeating through the leaves and indeed through all points of our body, from the crown to the soles of the feet, through every atom, and engaging in the job of purifying all negativities we have accumulated since beginning this time, all negativities associated with the 10 non-virtues of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, of lying, of harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip, of covetousness, malicious intent, and wrong view, of purifying all naturally occurring negativities, all negativities as prescribed by the Buddha, all infractions of our vows, the Patimoksha, the Bodhisattva, and the Tantric vows, and all negativities whatsoever that we have engaged in, that they are purified. all sicknesses of body and suffering of the mind is purified. All imbalances in our four elements, or the channels, winds, and drops, again, they are balanced and purified. And then all indeed our sense of the viewing and perceiving life through an ordinary view. Again, this is which holds us back from attaining enlightenment quickly. This is now transformed into being able to see everything through pure view. And so again, this brings forth a great joy in the mind.
And so the shit to travel long the Yelenga, Lama Shaja say a good hedge and so the Lama Shaja say good sources. So the shit to travel simply. Yeleja Lama Shaja sang a two the hedge and so the same Lama Shaja sang a two to sources. Rangel Lunga is a Lama Shaja sang a kusu to go Yemek some such a Nadia, Neg Gan Tamja Jen, and Lama Shaja sang a Tamashi to Jusu, so the Telecomasha.
And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of the Buddha. Now I see my own body, speech, and mind as being indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, of an enlightened being. And the place that I am in is also transformed into the enlightened abode.
Tara Lama Shaja Sanga Kusu to the War Yeme Juati, Tugale, and Lama Shaja Sanga Kupato Beba Trade, Vesela Kupato Beba Trade, and it comes of the subject Tam Gelata, and it the Chasawari Shuala Tene, Teda Tanjaka Takajet, Kaso de Tamja, Lama Shaja, Kijik, Lama Shaja Sanga Kusu to War Yeme Jusu, subject. Net the Daja Neg, John Tamja Dan, Lama Shaja Sanga, Davish Jusu, so what did the Kumashi?
And then seeing myself as the fully enlightened being, I sent out light, countless light rays from my own heart, each as a bringing with it a Buddha body on these light rays, and they go out into all the 6 realms of existence, entering into the crowns of all the sentient beings therein, and thereby automatically and spontaneously purifying all negativities, and they arise as fully enlightened beings. Likewise, the places that they are in, wherever they are purified of all fault and stain, and they are transformed into fully enlightened palatial abodes.
Simja Tamje and Sanje Simja Tamje, Sanja Kuma Tugi, and Simja Sanja Kuma Kugi, said Tanima didn't drop to Sana Kawaku.
And so we rejoice greatly in that, oh, today is the day that I have really fulfilled that goal of leading all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. How wonderful.
What does Simja Tamja Sanja Sala Goba? And teach it to Susu Jawa Tuma, to be so the Jabaka, you did the Tuma. Do some of your mother talk about Parta Tamre, so Kawaku, the Kobasha.
Likewise, when I contemplate that this state of enlightenment and all the virtue of leading all sentient beings to that state, and indeed myself as the agent of that virtue, they are completely lacking any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. From that contemplation of emptiness arises bliss, and they abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
What Danda Meva is a winner the Kawaii, in a Danda Samla Tawa tea, winner for a Dendeju, you do your Jura show, so Kubasha.
And so here, of course, I'm operating at the level of imagination. This is, of course, can't happen just as quickly and readily as that. But I'm making a sincere dedication that it lays down imprints on the mind for my being able to genuinely generate this state for real in the future.
Tony Ninja Nimboja Lam Gula Majava Tabiamar, Janju, Tony to be Shira Gula Majava Tabiamar, and the day in by Inza, that's 소속이 내가 근데 지마이네 다 상에 근데 지만 되게 주나라 동에 주나라 가르쳐와 이마이네 양 그냥 그래 상에 그냥 그래 저 이마 대대 끼인데 자주 그셈 줄에게 아니 튕겨도 좋아쇼 튕겨도 좋아쇼 선조한테 뭐하지
And we say that this can't happen, of course, without generating compassion and the understanding of emptiness in the mind stream. So therefore, I make this a powerful appeal that whatever situation I find myself in, whatever the conditions I find, may I be able to use them to further generate the mind of enlightenment in my mind stream, and I may make this powerful prayer that this may be the case.
네, 다 간제 소속의 지금 내단 근데서 소속 나바 임바데 나바데 장주 쌤 기회 교류 주와쇼. 소속 시바이데 시바데 장주 쌤 기회에는 통견도 주와쇼. 아니 소속라 지금 강내를 그대 태바이나 디 장주 쌤 기회 통견도 디기 좋아이네 장주 쌤 기회 통견도 주와쇼. 그러나 배는 저거 싸바지라면 저거 싸바디 괜찮은 장주 쌤 기회 통견도 주와쇼. 저거지다 카테바이네 카테바디 장주가 쌤 계획 튕겨도 좋아쇼. 딱 이제 가리 이마이네. 장주가 쌤 맞아봐. 걔는 관나 배가 튕겨도 좋아쇼. 어때?
So it must be every possible situation that we find ourselves in to be able to enhance more and more and more the prevalence of that sentiment of the mind of enlightenment in our own thinking. This is so important that whatever the situation, whether I'm sick or whether I'm on the verge of death, that I see it all as conditions for generating the mind of enlightenment. That should be the first thought that is, whatever problems I am having or whatever happiness I am having, that they will all be seen as just conditions for me to further the mind of enlightenment, to cultivate the mind of enlightenment in my own mind stream. When I make a new friend, may that be the cause and the conditions for my enhancing the mind of enlightenment. When I separate from that friend, again, may that be the cause for the conditions for my enhancing the mind of enlightenment. And in brief, really, we have to train the mind to see that whatever the situation is, whatever the conditions are, that we make them all the conducive conditions for further cultivation of the mind of enlightenment.
네. 우마땅에 대해 장주가 쌤 계획 맞아봐 계획거든. 우야태에 대해 장주서 맞아봐 계획 통제되고 딱 간체 집어내. 그죠 맞아는 잡대 건가 장주서 맞아봐 계획 관내 건도표 통제를 용해지겠다. 삼로땅 우아체 소속의 탑시에체. 근데 제발은 아니 소속 미세데 미닝풀 차버렸다. 미닝풀 차버라. 어때 저 탑시체 돌아 아니 우아체 어때
And so we should dedicate really that, even on the breath, we should be generating the mind of enlightenment. On the out breath, exhaling, and to exhale with that thought of the mind of enlightenment, inhaling again with the thought of the mind of enlightenment, that everything, every movement we make should be done with the motivation of the mind of enlightenment. And, to think like this, and then to dedicate that virtue, and then to back it up with actions. This is the way we should try to live our lives.
Okay, what is it?
You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at your existence, and Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception, Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Losandrakta, at your feet and make request.
Everyone, thank you.
Ganga.
Thank you
Good
very
night,
much,
Ganga.
Ganga.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.